it's you. I'm so glad you're here. Happy Friday. It's Casual Friday today for me. It's basically Casual Friday every day for me, but I'm happy to be here and just want to make sure you can see me because I know dressed in camouflage could hide me. I came to talk to you today about being real. And, the idea started this morning with a group conversation I was having. I'm not even quite sure how we got on the topic, but I was reminded of going to college bars. And back in the college days in the 1900s when I was in college, we would go out dead of winter, 20 degrees, 15 degrees, whatever it was, in like shorts or skirts and heels and tank tops, and not bring a jacket because there was no place to put a jacket. And so we would be standing out in the freezing cold for a while because we were underage. So as I'm telling you this story, I'm assuming the statute of limitations is expired on me having used a fake ID in my early days. And so we would stand along this wall. And if you went to the University of Maryland and you lived in College Park in the 90s or early 2000s, you may remember places like Terrapin Station and the VU. And you would stand outside and wait until whatever time they decided they were going to start looking at IDs with a blurrier eye, right? So if you were actually 21, you could get in, you could go into the bar. If you were not yet quite the age, then you had to wait. And sometimes it was like they just made you wait. Sometimes they thought the liquor board was coming by. None of these places exist anymore for reasons unknown. But here we are. So this one night I'm waiting outside, and you never knew like if the bouncers were going to go easy on you or go difficult on you. And so you memorized your ID. You had to know your address. You had to know your zip code. You had to know what county your fake hometown was in, because these were not fake IDs. These were like real driver's licenses that other girls in my sorority sort of passed down the line. And so I had this color hair approximately, and so did the person on my ID. And I memorized, I don't remember it anymore, but she was from a county in Pennsylvania, and I knew what her sign was, and I knew how old she was, all the things that you need to know if somebody questions you and quizzes you on your ID. And I remember being at this bar this one particular night, freezing cold. We waited probably from 10 o'clock until about 12:30 until we could get in. And I go up and I hand the ID over. Thank you to Michelle Feuerstein. If you went to the University of Maryland and you are Michelle, thanks. You got me into a bar sometimes, but not this night. And I remember the bouncer asking me, all of the questions. What's your sign? Where are you from? What county? He was like in depth. And then he looked at it and he said, how'd you get your eyes to change from blue to green? And then he handed the ID back to me and told me to get out of there. And so that night I didn't go out to a bar. But it got me to thinking about how we fake stuff, right? And how we pretend who we are at work. And it's like there's been this unwritten rule in our lives, and especially with the rise of social media. I got a comment, LinkedIn user says, ha, I love that. LinkedIn user, whoever you are, you have not authorized StreamYard to share your name, so I can't see who you are. But thank you for the laugh. I love a laugh. And and Jeff says contact lenses to meet different guys. Maybe, right? Maybe I needed some disguises. I certainly did have my friends and I had fake names. If there was somebody unsavory who came to talk to us, we would listen for how we introduced ourselves. And if we were using our fake name, then another girl would come over and sort of help us out of the situation. It was sort of a girl code back in the day. I don't know if that still exists or if we're just texting each other and saying like, save me. Anyway, so it got me thinking about this phenomenon that we are children and then we are teenagers and then we're young adults. And the whole way through, we're taught to keep our social media clean, delete that picture, have a Finsta so that you're not showing yourself on Instagram in a negative light. And what it teaches us, and I was, entering the work world before social media, but sort of the same rules apply. They're just, I think, amplified now because of social media. But you get this impression or direct order that you are supposed to be a certain kind of professional when you're at work, and that it's not the same as the you that you are in real life. Now, sure, some rules apply. If you're a person who likes a boozy brunch, it's not a great idea to do that at work. Maybe don't have a mimosa at your 11 a.m. team meeting. And some workplaces are freer with cursing or swearing, and some workplaces are freer with, stories about your weekend adventures. And so you do want to have a little discernment there. But there is this sort of instruction guide as you become a young professional, and as you grow, it stays with you. And I know people who have done this through their whole careers. And in fact, I've been pretty formal in most of my career. And I'll tell you in a minute what changed that. But I joined the workforce and I created two separate Laurens. I created at home Lauren, who was easygoing and independent, but liked to sit around with friends and laugh, like to go out for a drink, like to, just kind of hang out and be free. And then work Lauren, buttoned right up and here to help. And what can I do? And I better figure this out on my own, because if I tell them I don't know how to do something, then they're going to think that I'm dumb or that I'm lazy or whatever the situation, right? And so as I grew and as I went from 20 to 30 to 40, work Lauren and home Lauren lived in this kind of parallel where it was I could take off the work hat and be myself. And what happened to me in jobs was I would leave a job and then people would say oh, good. Can I be friends with you now? Because they knew there was more behind work Lauren. But I kept this sort of wall up. And part of that was that I was in HR. And so there's sort of been this expectation. I think it's starting to change a little bit, but there's sort of been this expectation in corporate US work that HR is held to a different standard of professionalism, of appropriateness, of towing the line and following the rules and all of that. And that's part of the job. And I get that. I still live it myself. I still believe in it from an HR perspective, but also we're human beings. And until I was about, early 40s. Hey, Carrie, thanks for joining. Hey, Lauren, great live topic. Thank you so much. Feel free to ask questions in the chat, by the way, or make comments. I love for this to be interactive whenever it can be. And so work Lauren would show up to work, and work Lauren would be professional, and I would hold my tongue for things I thought were funny. I have a great capacity to find humor in just about everything, in a kind way. I never attack people, but I can make almost anything funny. And I didn't really bring that to work all the way. I did a little bit. But I would sort of, save fun Lauren for after work. And then I had a shift 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago, a week ago was the anniversary. I broke both of my shoulders. It was traumatic, horrible, probably the worst thing that ever happened to me. And it was also the thing that sent me on this trajectory to figure out that I wanted to take my side gig and coaching to a full-time business. So blessing, I guess. I don't know. I still wish it didn't happen and I had figured out my life a different way. But anyway, so I went out on this, Ryan Liga, hello. So nice to see you. You were always fun. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. I'm even more fun now. Brian and I worked together, I don't know, 15 years ago or so. So I'm super happy to be remembered as being fun. So broke my shoulders and literally couldn't work, couldn't feed myself, couldn't do anything by myself. And so went from hospital to living in rehab centers for a little while, and quickly nicknamed myself TRex Arms because all I could do was this. Fortunately, the bottom half of my arms worked, and I wrote a blog about it and, used one thumb at a time on my phone to keep that going. Jeff is saying comparative pastors, priests, rabbis who always wear even garden in dress clothes and spell God, GAWD. Yes, it's like you put on a uniform, right? And when you're a religious leader, literally you're putting on a uniform. And that uniform makes it so that now you're the professional version of yourself. And if you take it all the way out to gardening, then you're always the professional level of yourself. And so I started blogging about breaking my arms, and it was funny, and it was really raw because I was on a lot of painkillers, which, gratefully I did not like being on, but was necessary when basically the top of my body was broken. And so I shared it with my coworkers, and all of them Jeff is saying, pronounce God. I'm in. I'll do that. So here I am at my most vulnerable, telling everybody how it is to be in nursing homes when you're, in your early 40s and not able to feed yourself, and things happen like the person, the nurse's aide who's feeding you feeds you a scoop of eggs and then puts yogurt on the same spoon without taking the remaining egg off the spoon, and you don't get to choose because you don't have hands to use, right? So I wrote about those kinds of things. I wrote about the vulnerability of, some pretty serious stuff, having to go to the bathroom and not having the nurse's aides answer your call, and not being able to do anything about it, and how humbling that is when you're the person who helps everybody and now you're the person asking for help. And making jokes about all kinds of things. And then I came back to work, and now everybody knew that version of me. Jeff says we call them physical rehab centers. Yes, I called it rehab, but it is a physical rehabilitation center. It was inside of both of them. Actually, I was in two different ones. We're inside of a nursing home. And in both, there was one other youngish person. And every time we saw each other, we were like, oh, hey, you're also not in the retirement category. And I went back to work, and I was regular Lauren. Just one Lauren, one integrated full Lauren. And I still had my leadership responsibilities. I still was a vice president. I still was an HR professional. And there was just such great relief in deciding to be myself, my whole self at work. Now I'm not like a brunch drinker, right? I'm really not a drinker at all, not great at it. But if I were, I would have the discernment to say like, oh, not a great idea to bring a glass of vodka with ice to an afternoon meeting. So, still discernment about what you do and don't do. But I was the whole me, and it is so much easier to just be one person and not to think, oh, I got to go into work mode now. I'm going to be home Lauren now. Now I'm going to be family member Lauren. Now I'm going to be Lauren who volunteers for stuff. And I just dropped it all. And I just sort of said like, I'm just going to be one regular Lauren. And what I realized is that I'd been faking who I was. And I don't know if faking it is really the right word. I'd been curbing who I was because of this internal perception that other people had an expectation of me to do that. And nobody batted an eye. There were people from work who were like, I love reading your blog. And there were people at work who were checking in with me who I don't know if they would have checked in with me if I hadn't sort of let my guard down and opened up that way. I think, letting people come visit me in a rehab center where I couldn't do anything, including my own hair, and I had no control over what I looked like. Being that level of vulnerable really just sort of like threw me over the edge to just being myself. And the lesson that I learned from it, and something that I work with my clients on a lot, is nobody's asking me to be this hard on myself except for me. And I work with a lot of people who go into work and they have this like certain expectation of themselves in terms of their level of performance, their level of commitment, the number of hours they put in, how quickly they respond to emails at night, how quickly they jump to raise their hand if somebody in the room says, who's going to do this? That they always expect that it's them who should be raising their hand, which was also, a way that I formerly functioned. And what you realize as you sort of test out doing things in a more authentic way and being more yourself and stopping faking that you're supposed to be a certain person and you're supposed to be a certain way, is that you see that nobody's batting an eye at it. And so I went from, being a person who always raised my hand, which of course was like the hilarious part of breaking both of my shoulders because I literally could not be a hand raiser, to testing the waters. And don't get me wrong, I went back to work like at full force and very hard and too many hours and all of that. And then I realized and started unraveling that I could be doing things in a different way. That I was setting these expectations for me to be buttoned up and hold back on things and be the person who volunteered for everything. And I think you can do that. You can have a separate work and home life. You can, parse out what parts of you want to show at work versus what you're willing to show at home. It's a lot less fun though. And what I realized in my last couple of years of working in corporate was it's so much easier and it's so much more fun. And it's so much more freeing to just show up and be who you are. And that, the more you fake it, the more that you are deciding who you should be at work and following that because that's what you've decided. You haven't asked anybody else. The more pressure sits on your chest. And the more you like deintegrate, separate who you think you can be at work. And the more you have to sort of follow the storyline of the persona you've created at work. And so when you go to work this week, next week, I encourage you to notice, not to do anything, right? Just to notice. Where does something that would come up at home that you would talk about come up into your head at work and you're stopping yourself? And like maybe just have a sheet of paper next to you, make a little tick mark every time you notice yourself holding back. And ask yourself, like, what would it be like? How much cooler could this be if I just like said the joke or told the story about my kid or didn't apologize for the cat walking by with its tail going across the screen, right? Like part of the freedom too is coming from us seeing the inside of each other's homes and seeing when the kids run by and the dog barks and the spouse comes in not knowing that you're on a Zoom call and having a conversation with you about why you let the milk go bad and not replaced it. And Andrew popping in. Hey, Andrew, nobody puts pressure on us like ourselves. That could not be more true, right? All of this stuff I was making up about being my most professional self and buttoning up and nobody wants to hear funny stories from HR and, all of that kind of stuff that I created it's all undoable, right? It's so easy to come in as yourself and people know anyway that you are more than you're showing at work if you're holding back. People knew. And they really welcomed me when I opened up more. And so let me know how that goes. Leave me a comment next week or shoot me a DM. And if you're watching this, let me know how it goes to just notice, to just like spend a little time playing and notice like, ooh, I would have told the story about the duck in my living room. I don't have a duck in my living room, but that would be cool, actually. It'd be surprising. I live on the upper floor of a building. But notice those times when you hold back and consider whether you're willing to give yourself permission to just be you everywhere and not have to decide at each twist and turn who you're going to show and who you're going to show up as. Have a great weekend. So glad to be here with you and so glad for the conversation in chat. Great to see everybody. Take care.